Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome. I'm Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the Policy Office in the Division of Institution and Award Support at the National Science Foundation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second day of the Fall 2024 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And I'm now pleased to turn over this session to our presenters who will cover the role of the Office of the Inspector General at NSF.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending the Office of Inspector General portion of the conference. I'm Heather Gallagher. I'm an audit manager with the Office of Inspector General, or OIG. I've been working for the OIG for about 7 years. My focus is really on financial and IT-related audit work, but more recently, over the last couple of years, I've been specifically focused on single audits of awardees. And prior to working for the IG's office, I spent about 7 years auditing contractors at the Department of Defense. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Lee now for her to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Lee Stokes. I'm a senior investigative attorney. I have been here since December 2001, but magically I'm still 29. Don't do the math. And it's good to be here today. I think I've done 300 plus civil, criminal, and administrative cases during my time here. And I am excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so you are probably wondering, what is an Office of Inspector General, or OIG? So this presentation will describe what our office does and how we interact with NSF-supported institutions during audits, investigations, and other similar work that we conduct. So what does the OIG do? We perform oversight activities of NSF. And in order to do this, we need to be independent, which means we are separate from NSF. And in order to maintain independence, we report to the National Science Board and to Congress. We do not report to the NSF director. So our goals are to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, and to prevent and detect fraud, waste, and abuse in agency programs and operations. And in order to help us accomplish our goals, we have full access to records and subpoena authority. So our office is broken up into two main sub-offices. We have the Office of Investigations, which Lee will discuss a little later, and the Office of Audits, Inspections, and Evaluations. That's where I work. My office does a lot of work focused on awardee institutions. We call these external projects since they are focused on organizations other than NSF. We also conduct engagements of NSF's programs to identify ways to improve systems and operations. We call these internal projects since they're focused on NSF's internal operations and programs. And recently, we've been conducting some work on specific NSF programs, which has also involved specific awards of awardee institutions. We've been calling these hybrid projects since they sort of touch on NSF and awardee institutions. And some examples are, we've done some work with the EPSCoR program. EPSCoR stands for Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research, and with the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So I'm going to focus my discussion today on our external projects of specific awardees and on single audit quality assurance reviews. These are probably the areas that you're most interested in as an NSF award recipient. But before I continue discussing audits, inspections, and evaluations, I did want to mention that as part of our mission to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, we conduct outreach presentations to the research community at like educational institutions, conferences, other meetings like that, to provide education about recognizing and preventing fraud, administering federal funds, and promoting responsible research conduct. So how do we pick our audits, inspections, and evaluations? So as we approach each fiscal year, we come up with a project plan for the upcoming year. And we have to start with the audits and reviews that we are required to conduct by law. So that's in the orange box on the slide. And then we move on to other priorities as outlined in the 3 discretionary boxes on the slide. Today, I'm going to talk more about the risk-based assessment that you see in the blue box and the single audit work that you see in the green box. So let's talk about the typical projects that my office conducts that you may be asked to participate in. So the first area is the external projects, which are typically incurred cost audits. So in any given year, we typically complete about 20 external audits. Most of them are done by independent public accounting firms that we contract with. These audits are not just a review of incurred costs on a single award. Instead, the auditors look at all costs claimed on NSF awards during the scope. So usually scope is like a year or 2 years or 3 years for a particular awardee. And the auditors will use data analytics on the awardee's general ledger to identify risk areas across the institution to focus on during the audit. So a typical incurred cost audit will review the awardee's financial systems and expenditures and compare the awardee's drawdowns to the accounting system. So depending on your role within the organization, you may be involved in supporting these audits. You might be asked some clarifying questions, or you may be asked to provide supporting documentation. The other main area that you might be involved in are our single audit reviews. So all award recipients that spend $750,000 or more of federal funds in a year have to obtain a single audit. And this is a very important oversight tool for us and for the agency. So we perform quality assurance work to help ensure the single audits can be relied on by government agencies and pass-through entities as part of their monitoring. So we review the quality of the single audits of NSF award recipients for which NSF has audit cognizance. So generally, those institutions that receive the majority of their federal funding from NSF, NSF will have audit cognizance of those institutions. So we conduct reviews of single audit reports to determine if the reports comply with federal requirements and professional auditing standards. So when we perform these reviews, we may reach out to you or to your auditors for clarification regarding something in the audit reporting package. We also conduct more in-depth reviews of the actual audit work performed by the auditors. And so these reviews may include like a review of source documentation that you provided to your auditors during their audit testing. So during our review, we may ask the awardee to provide some of the supporting documentation that they sent to the auditors. So those are the 2 main types of projects that you might be involved with. So as I mentioned a few slides back, every year we put together an annual project plan. So part of the project plan involves conducting an external audit risk assessment, which helps us select awardees to audit during the year. So each year NSF awards about 12,000 new awards and manages more than 56,000 active awards. We are an office of about 30 people, so we can't audit everything. So what we do is we developed a risk model to help us focus our resources and select institutions to audit. The basic steps in this risk model include gathering the universe of NSF awards, and then defining the population of awardees. Because we typically select an awardee to audit, not a specific award. That's why we define the population of awardees. And then we apply internal and external risk factors, such as total award dollars, number of awards, drawdown patterns, if there's any findings in the single audits, if NSF has identified any oversight issues or concerns, and if there were any other like prior audit findings. So we put all this information together to help us select institutions to audit during the year. So a few slides back, I touched on the quality assurance work we perform with single audits from a communications perspective. Well, now I'm going to go a little more in depth into the work we do with single audits. So just a bit of background, for 2022, there were more than 45,000 single audits. And those audits covered 1.8 trillion in federal expenditures. And of that 1.8 trillion, about 6.2 billion represented direct NSF expenditures. And 69 of those single audits fell under NSF cognizance or oversight responsibilities. So we conduct reviews of all the audits that fall under NSF. And this review is referred to as a desk review, and it involves us reviewing the audit reporting packages that are submitted publicly to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And what we do is we determine whether they contained all required elements and provided sufficient details to support any corrective actions and management decisions. So in addition to the desk reviews, we try to select 2 to 3 audits per year to perform a quality control review. And so the desk reviews only review the audit reports themselves, but the quality control reviews look at the actual audit work performed by the auditors. So these reviews, we review the auditors' work papers to determine whether the audits were planned and performed in accordance with applicable standards. So similar to the audits of the awardees, we can't perform a quality control review of every audit. So what we do is we have a risk assessment process to select the audits for quality control review. And some of the factors that go into the risk assessment process are if there were quality issues identified during our desk reviews, whether we or another OIG has performed a recent quality control review of the auditor, the number of single audits performed by the auditor, the overall amount of federal expenditures and NSF-specific expenditures audited by the auditor, whether or not the auditor is a member of the AICPA's Government Audit Quality Center or GAQC, and some other trends across the auditor's reports. So based on the results of our risk assessment, we select 2 or 3 audits to perform a quality control review. So now I'm going to talk about our engagement process and the types of more formal communication that occur during our projects. So if we're doing an audit, the audit process typically takes about a year from the engagement letter to the final report. If we're doing like an inspection, evaluation, or other type of review, it's typically shorter, but can still take 6 months to a year. So at the beginning of the project, we will initiate the project with an engagement letter and an entrance conference with the auditee. And the real purpose of these two is to communicate the objectives and the scope of the project, discuss our process, and discuss our anticipated timeline. So after field work, we will create a discussion draft, which is basically a first draft of our report. And it includes potential findings and recommendations from the audit fieldwork phase. So the discussion draft is issued to the auditee, and the auditee has a chance to review it and informally respond to the report if there's anything that they think is inaccurate or they want to provide more information on. That's the time to do it. So our goal with the discussion draft is that there should be no surprises by the time we have the exit conference and you receive the formal draft report. So after our findings and recommendations are finalized, we'll have an exit conference with the auditee, and then we'll issue the official draft, and that gets issued to the auditee. The auditee has a chance to formally respond to the draft report. Then we incorporate the formal response into the final report in its entirety. So then we issue the final report. It's sent to NSF and Congress and to the award recipient if it's an audit of an NSF awardee. And all reports are also posted on our website and to, it's called oversight.gov. If the engagement is a single audit quality control review, that's typically a bit faster. Those usually take about 4 to 5 months, depending on other priorities that we have. The communication for those is pretty much the same, except the engagement letter and the final report are sent to the auditor that we reviewed, the awardee, any federal funding agencies, and any applicable pass-through entities. Also, if there are any grant recipients involved in any of our engagements, similar to with the single audit reviews, formal communication will be limited to the engagement letter and the final report as far as what's provided to the actual grant recipient. But you may still be contacted during field work if we have any questions or explanations if you're a grant recipient. So in 2022, we issued a capstone report called Promising Practices for NSF Award Management. And this report was based on 18 completed audits, and it included the most common audit findings, opportunities for improvement, and suggestions for how to improve compliance, which were identified across those 18 audits. So the report is intended to help members of the recipient community identify ways to strengthen award management practices and improve the overall stewardship of federal funds. The report included several suggestions for implementing a strong award management environment, including continually monitoring and verifying the allowability of high-risk expenses, strengthening controls over applying indirect cost rates, ensuring award recipients create and maintain sufficient appropriate documentation, documenting and justifying reasonable allocation methodologies, and regularly reviewing and updating grant management policies and procedures. So if you are looking to improve your award management process, you may want to check out this report. So twice a year, typically at the end of May and the end of November, we issue our semi-annual report. And this report is OIG wide. It's not just limited to my office. So it includes work completed by both my office, which is the Office of Audits, Inspections, and Evaluations, and Lee's office, the Office of Investigations. And the semi-annual reports summarize our oversight work performed during the 6-month period, and it includes the status of significant findings and recommendations. So if you want to see a comprehensive summary of all the work we've performed for a 6-month period, check out our semi-annual reports. Then from there, if there is something that you want to learn more about, you can read the full report. And the semi-annual reports and all of our full reports are posted on our website and to oversight.gov. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lee for her to discuss the Office of Investigations.
Okay. Hi. As Heather mentioned, under the Inspector General Act, 5 U.S.C. Chapter 4, our mission is to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and abuse. The Office of Investigation, or OI, does this by conducting administrative, civil, and criminal investigations. We generally follow the money, not the science, except for in research misconduct cases, and we generally have in excess of 100 cases at any given time. Our jurisdiction is generally when NSF is the potential victim of wrongdoing. At minimum, the underlying allegation has to have an NSF nexus. Our cases involve NSF funds, the entity receiving NSF funds, the research done, the people funded, grantees, contractors, subcontractors, and then subordinates. And our cases generally involved entities not abiding by the award conditions and other applicable rules, or naughty people misusing NSF funds, violating criminal statutes, or engaging in research misconduct. We also handle whistleblower retaliation allegations. We get allegations from a number of sources, often principal investigators, program officers, review panelists, university administrators, collaboration, anonymous and non-anonymous people through our hotline and other methods. Anyone may confidentially contact NSF OIG. If you go to our homepage, oig.nsf.gov, there's a big orangey red button that says report fraud, waste, or abuse. We also have at the end of our slides additional contact information. So our award process, and these are some steps we take. They're not always in this order, but when we get an allegation and an investigative assistant reviews the allegation and does preliminary work to identify the NSF nexus, our OI managers then review the intakes and determine whether a case should be opened. The case is assigned to a case team. For research misconduct cases and administrative cases, an investigative scientist is assigned as a lead with a case attorney. For civil criminal matters, a special agent or criminal investigator is assigned along with an investigative attorney. Whistleblower retaliations get two attorneys. One is the lead and one is the case attorney. With all of these cases, our primary task is to fact find. We want to establish what happened. And as a secondary matter, we want to try to make sure that such events will not happen again. Our cases involve interviews, subpoenas, etc. Once we identify the facts, we have to figure out what to do with them. And so we may refer the matter to university for research misconduct, to a U.S. Attorney's Office if the matters are civil or criminal. We may also, or in addition, draft a report of our findings and refer it to NSF. It's important to note that we do not make the decision to prosecute criminally or go after somebody civilly, nor do we take administrative action. We present information to either the Department of Justice for criminal and civil referrals or to NSF for administrative matters, and those entities decide the actions to take. Our goal is always to bring the case to a logical conclusion, whether that be civil, criminal, administrative, or a combination of the three, or to close the case because the allegation is not substantiated. The majority of our administrative cases involve allegations of research misconduct under 45 U.S.C. Part 689, but we also investigate conflict of interest, violations of confidentiality in NSF's merit review process, or violation by NSF-funded researchers or institutions involving human subjects and animals. And we investigate whistleblower retaliation. Our research misconduct reg includes fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing or performing research that's NSF funded, reviewing research proposals submitted to NSF, or in reporting research results funded by NSF. A finding of research misconduct requires proof by the preponderance of evidence that the act is a significant departure from accepted practices of the relevant research community and that the act was committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. We recommend actions in research misconduct cases that vary depending on the severity of the underlying behavior, which range from a letter of reprimand to a government-wide debarment. NSF proper makes the final decision on whether or not research misconduct occurred and what the appropriate action is to safeguard the federal interest. We also, if the matter does not, we find a violation and conclude that it does not warrant further investigations, we used to send questionable research practice letters or questionable administrative practice letters. We have determined that, and following the scientific community, that there's little question that the acts are not ethical and have started describing those acts as detrimental. So now we send out detrimental research practice letters or detrimental administrative practice letters. We present criminal or civil cases to DOJ, either Main Justice in Washington, D.C., or the appropriate United States Attorney's Office. There are 83 throughout the country. And we work with Assistant United States Attorneys, also known as AUSAs, if they accept our case. This slide contains the violations we most often find. For example, 1001, criminal false statement or false claims. This is what Martha Stewart was charged with. They could not prove she committed insider trading, but they could prove she lied to federal investigators. We also use the Civil False Claims Act, certifying something was true when it isn't, or it didn't take place, and you said it did. It's all about the money and recoveries. We can get treble damages for the amount of wrongdoing associated with the wrongdoing. And also we can get a penalty for each instance. And mail or wire fraud, or when you use the mail or the internet to do naughty things involving NSF funds. We have different burdens of proof, as you may have known from TV watching or otherwise. The burden of proof for criminal cases is beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil and administrative cases, it's a preponderance of the evidence. And so sometimes our cases go civil or criminal because of the types of evidence we have. As I alluded to earlier, we refer matters to DOJ. Civil cases can result in monetary penalties, settlements, and compliance agreements. Criminal cases can result in fines or incarceration or both. During any of our cases, we can suspend or terminate an NSF award if we have reason to. We can also request that people who have done civil or criminal wrongdoing or administrative wrongdoing be debarred government-wide or suspended government-wide. Some of our administrative cases and research misconduct cases also, and with the requirement for certs and assurances, retractions, prohibition to service as an NSF reviewer, and things like that. There have been cases where we recommended civil, criminal, and administrative action. We had an individual who submitted falsified documents on a continuing grant in order to get the next increment of funding. And then when we interviewed her, she lied to us. And we worked with a criminal AUSA who charged her with 2 counts of 1,001. She was required to pay a fine. We then recommended that NSF debar her for her actions, and which they did for a period of time. And finally, we worked with a civil United States attorney, assistant United States attorney, because we felt that the university had failed to properly oversee the award, and the university and DOJ entered into a settlement agreement and returned funds. We may also refer matters to the Office of Audit. As I mentioned before, we do whistleblower cases. The Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act provides rights for federal employees against retaliation, and Title 41 U.S.C. Section 4712 protects employees of contractors, subcontractors, grantees, and subgrantees from retaliation for making a protected disclosure. A protected disclosure is providing information reasonably believed to provide evidence of a violation of law, rule, or regulation, gross mismanagement, gross waste of funds, abuse of authority, a substantial or specific danger to public health and safety. These can include civil, criminal, administrative, or personnel offenses. And NSF, a core value of OIG is to protect NSF employees, contractors, and award recipients and subrecipients who come forward and make allegations of wrongdoing. You're protected if you make a disclosure to management, OIG, or Congress. You can find more information about these on our webpage. You'll also find links to report information if you're a whistleblower. And if you believe you've been subject to retaliation for protected whistleblowing, you may contact either our office or any OIG that's related to the funds in question, or the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, which is an independent executive agency. Both links to our whistleblower form and the Office of Special Counsel are on our website. You can also reach the Office of Special Counsel at osc.gov. In addition, we have a whistleblower ombudsman, William Kilgallen. He can provide additional information about prohibition against retaliation for protected disclosures and rights and remedies if a protected disclosure has occurred. Please note that the law does not permit the whistleblower protection coordinator to act as a legal representative, agent, or advocate, but he can tell you where to go for additional information. All right, and now we have our case studies. We have 6, and we'll see how many we get to with the time that we have remaining. As Heather said, if you're interested in our cases, you can always read our semi-annual report to Congress, which outlines the work we've done in 6 months increments. Okay, so with this case, which is case study number 1, a university, as Heather said, we send CPA firms out to audit universities. And here, a university falsified documents during an audit, and it led to a $1.17 million settlement. For over 5 years, the university submitted claims and expended funds under its NSF awards. And each time it requested funds, as with everybody else, you certified that you are following the terms and conditions of the award. These conditions require expenditures be allowable, and reasonable, and that entities maintain adequate records to support their claims. Spoiler, here they did not. So the auditors, the CPA firm that NSF Audit sent, identified and questioned salary transactions because there were insufficient or no supporting documentation. So the research compliance coordinator noticed that time and effort documents were missing, and the university administrator asked her to provide the missing reports. And so she directed the PIs to submit backdated effort reports based on the salary amounts that had been paid. And she helpfully, for our case, sent an email saying, please gather/create these specific items for them. I need these 13 timesheets. Make sure they are signed and dated for the current month he is requesting. The coordinator also doctored documents using whiteout and other methods to alter the information, and she kept university officials appraised of her progress. So fabricating time and effort reports after the fact is not a good idea. And here the coordinator provided these reports to the auditor, and the auditor noticed that there was whiteout and other issues and brought the matter to the attention of the OIG, Office of Audit, which stopped the audit and referred the matter to the Office of Investigations. And we were unable to tell what faculty was actually being paid or how the university was parceling out funds for their grant. We also noted that they had submitted fabricated documents to the auditor and that they had undocumented salary costs. So every time they requested funds, it was a false claim under the False Claims Act. Ultimately, there were $540,000 in question cost, and which were salaries, fringe, and indirect costs associated with salary and fringe. We settled for $1.7 million, which was doubles plus penalties, and a 5-year compliance plan. And the university compliance coordinator pled guilty to 1 count of official certification or writing under 18 U.S.C. Section 1018 for knowingly making or giving certification she knew to be false. She was sentenced to 1 year probation. The university had a pattern and practice of paying its PhD teaching assistants using federal research funds, including NSF funds. So NSF often pays graduate students to do research under NSF awards. But NSF did not intend or agree to pay graduate students to teach because teaching assistant duties were unallocable to the award. They were unallowable under the cost principles. And the case was brought to the appropriate U.S. Attorney's Office and accepted for civil prosecution. The university agreed to pay $3.75 million to resolve the allegations that it violated the Civil False Claims Act. And the university ultimately fixed the issue by setting up a teaching assistant fund to pay its TAs, its teaching assistants. All right, this is slide number 3. It involved a small innovative research award, or SBIR, professor who was also the principal investigator at a university, and he had founded a research company. The company was funded exclusively through federal awards. Our investigation found that the PI, unbeknownst to NSF and the university, was also a paid researcher at a university in another country, and he failed to make the requisite disclosures of this position to both NSF and his university. His company, at his direction, submitted grant proposals to NSF for research he knew had already been completed in the other country. And when subpoenaed for record, he provided false timesheets to us. As a result, he was found guilty of conspiracy, false statements, and obstruction by falsification. He was sentenced to time served. For trial, he was judged to be a flight risk, and he was put on house arrest until trial. So he had served 3 months of house arrest, and he was also had 2 years of supervised release. Case study 4. This case involved a university that received multiple NSF awards over a 10-year period for research at a center in another country. It had some funds that were used to fund the center itself and other funds for work done by a particular PI, our subject. The center invoiced university for research-related expenses approved by the lead PI. Again, that was our subject. And it paid invoices for over 9 years without ever reviewing, requesting, or receiving documentation to support the millions of dollars it sent to the center. 20 of the invoices were actually for advances totaling $8.4 million, and they were not used to cover immediate needs, which is the rule for advances. In addition, the university kept the interest earned on the advanced funds. When we subpoenaed documents related to NSF award, the university was unable to support the vast majority of the expenditures for which it had requested reimbursement from NSF. We also determined that the award funds had been commingled, meaning that there was no way to determine if the expenditures were allocable, reasonable, and used solely for the authorized purpose or the particular award for which they were given. You certified that it was the expenditures it had made were for the purpose and condition of the award when it requested money, but it had no basis for doing so, making each of the 48 certifications a false claim. And the reason there are only 48, because at the time, universities submitted quarterly financial reports. They did not have the ability, as they do now, to request money as needed. So they did it quarterly. The university's single audit identified the issue and notified the university that funds had been improperly used. And the university failed to notify NSF of significant problems for more than 2 years. In addition, to having supporting documentation before paying vast sums of money, the university had an obligation to notify NSF of problems related to the financial management of the award per our conditions. The case resulted in a $2.7 million settlement to resolve allegations under the False Claims Act and a 5-year compliance plan. And the federal government's grant regulations, the circulars, uniform guidance now, require universities to exercise control and oversight over the NSF award funds they receive. And they must have documentation of salary payments, purchase of equipment, travel expenses, and other items charged to the award. And there's also regulations limiting cash advantage to the recipient's immediate cash needs. And finally, universities are required to notify NSF of any significant problems related to the financial management of the awards. So this university failed to do all of that. Okay, case study 5. This case involves an administrative investigation. So In this case, an NSF-supported graduate student doing research was found to have falsified data, plagiarized another researcher's dissertation, and committed ethical violations in manuscripts, which 2 journals published. So ultimately, the student submitted manuscripts to 7 journals simultaneously. She submitted manuscripts without co-author's knowledge or consent, falsified a journal submission page, and used false email addresses for co-authors to keep them from finding out that she had submitted manuscripts on which they were listed as co-authors. When asked, the student blamed a hostile work environment, improper supervision, and a lack of research, responsible conduct of research training, although the university records showed that she had in fact had this training. She was also mad that her advisor canceled meetings and seemed to have a general lack of interest in her work, but never took any responsibility for the wrongdoing. The student felt that they deserved a publication after synthesizing compounds for the advisor. Ultimately, the university conducted an accurate and thorough investigation under its research misconduct policies and provided us with a report. They concluded that by preponderance of the evidence, the student had committed both falsification and plagiarism, that her actions were a significant departure from accepted practice and committed intentionally. They dismissed the student from the university, and the publications were retracted. They required better student training in the future, which is a nice outcome. It's one of the things we like to see because, as I mentioned previously, we like to see that the problem's not likely to recur again at that entity. And at the time, NSF did not require research, responsible conduct of research by faculty. It does now, but it did require it for students and postdocs. So, as I said earlier, she had the training, the requisite training. We recommended a research misconduct finding, a 3-year debarment, and 6 years of certifications and assurances from the student, although she wasn't there to do it, and NSF agreed. And finally, this case involves plagiarism and merit review violations. Specifically, a reviewer copied material from an NSF proposal he reviewed as a reviewer, and he put it in his own NSF proposal, which he then submitted and he was the PI on this proposal. As with other cases, we referred the matter to the PI's institution, and the PI admitted that he had copied the material into his proposal. The university required the PI submit plagiarism reports, proposals, and papers for 3 years and complete additional training. So that the universities in research misconduct cases and other cases act to protect the university's interest. Sometimes these align with what also protects NSF and the federal interest. Sometimes they don't. So NSF decided to go further, and they debarred the PI for 2 years, required 5 years of certs and assurances. They prohibited him from serving as an NSF reviewer, advisor, or consultant, or rotator. And the NSF director also made a finding of research misconduct. And they returned the pending proposal without review due to the research misconduct finding. A few years ago, our office also completed a report based on analysis of 10 years of plagiarism case data. About 80% of our research misconduct cases are plagiarism related, and the subjects are often employed in junior academic positions, with assistant professors being the most frequent. So adding the new RCR training requirement for faculty may be helpful in presenting these types of misconduct. And to conclude, if you have questions related to compliance with grant terms, allowable cost, or other matters, please ask. You can ask your NSF program officer or the NSF grant manager. You can get their advice in writing and follow it. And the best way to prevent an OIG investigation or consequences is to be knowledgeable about the handling of grant funds by taking the required training seriously, by documenting all of your expenses and work, and by asking your NSF program officer or grant manager any questions you have. We recommend training for everyone who handles any federal award, including principal investigators, administrative staff, financial staff, etc. And NSF now requires NSF-supported students, postdocs, and faculty take training on the handling of federal award funds. Now I'd like to turn it back to Heather.
Thanks, Lee. So if you have any other questions or if you need to report wrongdoing, you can contact our office with the phone numbers on the slide or through our website using the orange button at the top of the page that says Report Fraud, Waste, and Abuse. You can also mail concerns to our physical address if that's your preferred method. If you are interested in our office's work, you can follow us on X. But we ask that you don't report allegations through X because the quickest way to report fraud, waste, and abuse is using our website with that orange button. The link to this presentation will be available afterwards. So if you want to come back to this slide to have all this contact information and reporting information, you can do that. And then on the next slide, we provide our email addresses. So if you want to reach out to me or to Lee directly, you can also do that. So we hope that this overview of what our office, the NSF Office of Inspector General, does has been helpful, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome Lee and Heather back. And we have been answering a number of questions in the Q&A during the presentation. And we do have a little bit of time for some additional questions. I will just mention at the outset that some of the questions that came in, it might have been a little hard for us to decipher what it was exactly the topic you are asking about. If you don't get your question answered, please do contact the NSF OIG at the information that was just provided in the presentation. I'd also note that if you have questions that are related to a specific award at your organization, your first step, you have a question about that award, you want to contact the Cognizant Grants Officer for that award first. That should be your first step. So we marked a number of questions that we wanted to cover here. And the first one that I wanted to pose was, how might congressional reports or other federal government reports inform the work of the NSF OIG?
So from the audits, inspections, evaluations perspective, each year when we do our annual plan, our annual project plan, we consider congressional priorities when we're determining what work we're going to perform. And then also, if any specific requests come in from Congress throughout the year, we will prioritize those as well. Lee, I don't know from the investigation side how it affects investigations.
So generally, we do not get involved in NSF's decision on what to fund, absent some wrongdoing alleged in the proposal process or the merit review process. We do look at other agencies to see if they're noticing an uptick in a particular type of case, and we might look at proactively to see if we have something similar. For example, a couple years ago, I think the Navy did a big review of its travel cards and found some fraud. So we did a proactive review of NSF's travel cards.
Okay, next question we have is, will those that are audited using a third party hear from NSF after the third party submits their audit findings?
So yes. So basically, we have a third party CPA firm that does the audit. There will be, they issue an audit report that has audit findings and recommendations in it. The report goes to NSF, and the awardee will get a copy of the report so that they can see what the findings and recommendations were. And NSF is responsible for resolving those recommendations. So if there's question costs, if there's recommendations to improve internal controls at the awardee organization, NSF is responsible for working with the awardee to resolve those recommendations in the report.
Okay, and next question is, does the NSF OIG investigate all reported incidents, and how many incident reports do you usually get in a year?
We do not have the capacity to investigate every allegation that we get. We have a process where we get allegations as intake, and those that are the most serious and things that are within NSF's jurisdiction, we tend to open as cases. We open approximately 75 to 100 cases a year. That is not including our proactive cases.
Okay, and next question is, can you clarify whether disclosures made by an individual should be reported first to the institution or organization, or directly to the to NSF or to NSF OIG?
There's two things: the disclosure of an allegation that meets the whistleblower criteria. So, violation of rule, that whole list. The allegation that that's going wrong at a university or at an NSF award can be made to any of them. It is the retaliation that should be made to us. If you've been retaliated because you've made such disclosures, that retaliation should come to OSC, Office of Special Counsel, or the OIG. But the underlying whistleblowing disclosure, the notification that something wrong is going on, can be made to any of those people. The university, sometimes it's a company executive, somebody with the, I think the statute said, somebody with the ability to handle that problem, to fix that problem or address it.
Okay, we had a couple of questions about the desk reviews that the NSF OIG does. So can you talk about the goals of the desk review and then how organizations are selected for them?
Okay, so for the single audit desk reviews, we do a desk review of every single audit that's submitted to the what's called the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, where NSF is either the oversight agency or cognizant agency. Typically, it's around 80 to 90 per year. And the desk review is a review of the audit reports that are submitted to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. So it's just making sure that the required language is in there, that it contains all, if there's findings, that the findings are, they contain all required elements, that the CFA is prepared correctly, just looking to make sure that the audit reporting package is prepared correctly. And then, as I mentioned, we also do the quality control reviews, which is a deeper dive into the actual audit work done by the auditors. And those are, it's a more extensive review than the desk review because we're actually looking at the audit work done. And those, we do a risk assessment to select like 2 to 3 audits per year to actually go and look at the auditor's work.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I see there might have been a misunderstanding in posing this question, so I'd like to clear it up a little bit, because they mentioned that NSF is requiring recipients to attend grant management training. That's not a training that I'm aware of, but I think they might have been referring to responsible conduct of research, because I think that was mentioned in one of your slides. Could you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I think NSF expanded the list of people who are required to take responsible conduct of research training. There also, if you are part of a settlement agreement with NSF, with DOJ and your entity, there may be requirements that everybody who works on an NSF award be given training on what is allowable cost and things like that. So they're two different things.
The NSF Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide will have all of the information on the requirements for responsible and ethical conduct of research. So I recommend taking a look at that. We are just about out of time. So I want to thank you both for coming today and presenting and answering so many questions. And before we go, I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us today, to highlight again that we hope you'll at least save the date for May 21st to 23rd for the next NSF Grants Conference, which will take place in person in New Orleans. And there will be an in-person option as well as a virtual option available. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today.